So good evening. My name is Ed Katz. I'm Associate Provost and Dean of University Programs here at UNC Asheville. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's talk. Before I begin with some opening remarks, I'd like to say that there'll be time for questions and answers at the end of today's talk, and that we're recording so that this can be broadcast on television, and so that it can also be recorded for UNC Asheville. And so I'd like to ask you that if you're interested in asking a question of tonight's speaker, to please go to one of the microphones in the aisles so that we can record you as well, okay? So the major sponsor of tonight's important talk is in her 30th year in the financial field. Sheila Jamieson, formerly Senior Vice President at Morgan Stanley with 18 years of service there and 6 years before that as an Account Vice President at Payne Weber, is Managing Director of the Jamieson Financial Group. Along the way, Sheila's earned many honors, including the Presidents and Directors Club memberships, listings in several Who's Who series, and appearances in Barron's and Money magazine. Rich Jamieson, operating manager of the Jamieson Group, and Sheila had a clear goal in mind when they founded their business. The core idea and the core value of the Jamieson Group is to provide their clients with the highest level of service and information in the financial world so that they can make knowledgeable decisions as they reach for their goals in life. Sheila and Rich both believe in the value of education and in giving back to the community. For example, Rich's educational background is interdisciplinary in the very way so many of our students here at UNC Asheville aspire to be educated. He has a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry, a Master's of Science and PhD in Biology, and an MBA from the executive program at Farley Dickinson University, where Sheila also graduated magna cum laude with her degree in management. Rich has served as an advisor to many international groups, including the African National Congress and the hospital systems of Israel and Costa Rica. He has served as a citizen ambassador to China as well. Sheila's community and philanthropic works extend out in many directions that are also interdisciplinary, I should add, including education, women's issues, and service on the fundraising committee of Tomorrow's Children Fund. So in those ways as well, I think their values match those of UNC Asheville's as well, which is a particular pleasure for me when introducing them. As Sheila has said to a colleague of mine, achieving your dreams is a complex issue. If you understand in both deep and broad ways what is taking place in the world around you, it enables you to act more effectively, whatever the circumstances might be. So with that, I'd like to present the founders of the Jamieson Financial Group, Sheila and Rich Jamieson. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. I can't tell you what a privilege it is for us to be here tonight. This is a dream come true for us. We really, really appreciate UNC. Amy Saunders works with us, and she's a graduate from here, and I can't tell you what a blessing it is to work with Amy and all the wonder that she's brought to our group. We moved here, well, we built a house. How many people built a house? So you know what I mean? We don't know if we moved here a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever it was. But we just love it here in Asheville. And we want to do many, many more events just like this, bringing you the same quality type speakers as Larry is. We moved here from New York City. And I have to share something with you because it really, really moved me. We lived on 48th Street, between 8th and Broadway. And any of you who've been to New York City, I'm sure you know about the M&Ms and the M&Ms climbing the Empire State Building there. Well, that shined into our kitchen window, our apartment there. And right across from our apartment was Morgan Stanley. And so we had a ritual that if the weather was inclement, we would duck into the Rockefeller Complex, which the Rockefeller Complex is like a major city underground. So we would walk to Broadway and then turn at 50th Street. And guess what? We would go in by the Lehman Building. And I have to tell you, after living in New York City 30 years, I always enjoyed looking at the Lehman Building. And those of you who never got to see it, you really missed a beautiful financial building, because what it had was pictures of America. It had pictures of the mountains. It had pictures of what really makes America great. And so we really enjoyed walking over there and ducking in to the underground facility. So when the financial crisis happened, it really saddened me that the way we gauged everything was we would wake up in the morning and here's Morgan Stanley. How many news trucks are in front of Morgan Stanley versus how many news trucks are in front of Lehman? And we would know who was going to have more bad press that day, who was in more trouble than the others, because they did seem to run to one another, and you won't believe how many news trucks with these huge satellite dishes sitting on them there would be. We saw that, and we saw that until one weekend, and we're hiking addicts. We would go hiking in Harriman State Park and enjoy upstate New York, but that weekend we decided we would go by and check out Lehman. And there was Lehman over the weekend, and people were taking boxes out. It was a very sad thing, and the expression on people's faces, and they were being inundated by the press as they were coming out of the building, just attacked almost. In fact, I had visions of the press as being big crows going after these employees of Lehman. A few months ago, I attended a conference with our broker-dealer, Investors Capital in Boston, and Larry was speaking there about his book. And what really got to me, that I never fully realized until I met Larry, if there were 25,000 employees at Lehman. 25,000 employees, and the other thing I got from Larry, just on this trip, as a matter of fact, do you know how prestigious Lehman was? That people would leave NBC to work in Lehman's audiovisual department. It was much more prestigious to work at Lehman than it was in NBC. Out of those 25,000 people, there were 8 people who took the firm into bankruptcy. And I have to tell you, it makes me so sad. I just can't go any further. Let me give it to you.
Most people know that they have been hurt by the financial crisis. Relatively few people know just how extensive that is. For example, everybody knows what a mobile is. The sculpture that hangs from the ceiling suspended by a few strings, seemingly separate pieces, different parts. What happens to a mobile when you move one piece? They all move. That's very similar to what we had with the financial crisis. Everybody knows the house values dropped, people know credit dried up, but there's so many different things that are ongoing with it, that from the credit cards and all the new rules and all the new fees that credit cards now charge because they can't charge some of the old fees, or the credit lines that they canceled or reduced, even for people who could pay them very easily. for the fact that the housing crisis is not over. And that's a subject for another night, because that'd take a whole night. Businesses can't get loans. You can't get loans unless you can prove that not only don't you need it, but you already have the money in the bank to pay it back 3 times. Businesses don't get loans. They don't hire people. Already unemployment is too high. Consumer spending is down because people aren't working. These are all the parts of the mobile, or at least these are some of the major parts of that mobile. As you heard a little earlier, we believe education is one of the most important pieces in getting into the investing world. The more you know about what is actually happening in any given situation, the more you can be prepared to deal with it in the most effective manner. With that, that's why we asked Larry to come to speak tonight. He is now working with the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission. He's working with the Financial Services Investigation Commission, is it? I may have missed one word in there, but these are the firms, these are our congresspeople, the lawyer, the senators, the congressmen who are now working with that Dodd-Frank bill, the bill that we passed that's going to keep this from ever happening again. I'll leave it to him to make the comments, because mine are probably not what you'd want to hear. But he's working daily with these people and has a better sense of what's going on, what's happening. Most important, could it happen again? I think I've said more than enough. Larry, if you would be so kind, I'd like to present Lawrence McDonald, as author of the New York Times bestseller, A Colossal Failure of Common Sense. It is now the best-selling business book translated into a dozen languages. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. So yeah, blessed to have 2 friends like the Jamesons. Thank you very much, and big round of applause to you folks. I just love the Southern hospitality of being here. When I came into Atlanta, as I always do, the striking difference between the Delta attendance at Atlanta versus JFK is just mind-boggling. In JFK, you go up to the counter with your bag, you want to check a bag, they say, "What do you want?" And here they say, "Hi, honey. I'm seriously thinking about moving down here." I recently got a great compliment on the book. It was a backhanded compliment. Mr. Oliver Stone came up with a new movie called Wall Street. It's basically a rewrite of the first great movie, bringing everything into the 21st century. And these guys stole about 16 lines, word for word, out of our book. And there's a scene in the movie where Michael Douglas gets up in front of a wonderful group of college students. And his first words out of his mouth are, "You're all," basically says a bad word. And when I watched the movie, I thought how wrong that is, because as college students today, you couldn't be coming out of college at a better time. Things can only get better. But I owe so much to the people that helped me write this book. Patrick Robinson, I must acknowledge. Patrick wrote, he's my ghostwriter. And ghostwriter, there's a little kind of an inside story of being a ghostwriter. One of the tricks is you should know absolutely nothing about the subject you're about to write about. And Patrick is famous for his Navy fiction books. He's written a #1 New York Times bestseller, Lone Survivor, about the Navy SEALs in Afghanistan. And as I flew over to see him for the first time, we started writing the book, and I said, "Patrick, we're going to write about credit default swaps and all these 21st century financial products." And he goes, "Lawrence, I thought a bond was something out of a Roger Moore movie." And the beauty of the book is that it's written in a very slow burn. So it starts off kind of spoon-feeding people information about the financial crisis, about investments. But toward the end, when you get to the end, you're really in the throes of advanced finance. And we really wrote the book for people on Main Street and to bring them deep inside of Wall Street. Tonight, what I'm going to do is kind of bring you inside of Lehman Brothers as we were heading toward that iceberg at 167 miles an hour. As Patrick said when we started to write the book, we wanted to bring the unvarnished tale of this bankruptcy to the world. This bankruptcy is 10 times the size of Enron. It's bigger than Enron, WorldCom, Adelphia combined. This is a bank that survived the Civil War, the Great Depression, World War I, World War II, Nixon being impeached, 9/11. This is a bank that brought to our world television in RCA. This is a bank that brought to the world a retail store the size of the Kremlin in Macy's. And on September 15th, 2008, 158 years of history came crashing down in just a horrific financial event, because behind the scenes, our banking regulators allowed the dominoes to become so big and so close together that when this bank fell, it hurt so many people watching us all around the world, people over in Europe. This bank is like a tsunami where waves thousands of miles away crashed on the shores and were devastating. In the book, a bank like Lehman Brothers, to make it clear how I did this, I ran a joint venture between our equities division and our fixed income division. And when I started working at the firm, I thought that all these, in Wall Street, I thought these divisions liked each other, they worked together. But it's a little bit like rival sororities or frats. My boss said, you realize, he said to me, Larry, no one's ever been successful at this job because it's like getting between the Hatfields and the McCoys. And it's 767 is like a bank the size of Lehman Brothers is like a 767 with 16 engines. You have to talk to people in the emerging markets trading desk. You have to talk to people that trade leverage loans. You have to talk to stock traders. You have to talk to municipal bond people to get the true story. Mortgage-backed securities, commercial mortgage-backed securities. Lehman Brothers was in so many different business lines. Over 200 people helped me write the book. And about those 30 or 40 senior managing directors I owe so much. I'd like to acknowledge them right now, but a lot of them don't want to be acknowledged. Wall Street is a private club. I'm taking huge risks being here. I'm taking a huge pay cut. I've left the street for a while, and I want to bring some of the truths to you, and I want to answer any questions you might have. And I really enjoy working with young people. I've been speaking all over the world at colleges, universities, from China to Calgary, Canada, to Panama, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Oslo. I've done 31 of these engagements. And I think that this is not only an important lesson in investing, but lessons that you can take forever for the rest of your life when you read this book. To understand Lehman Brothers, just picture in your mind a rocket ship 3,000 feet high. And at the top of the rocket, there's a capsule. And in that capsule, there are astronauts from the 1970s. But inside the rocket, in the meat of the ship, there's 21st century technology, 21st century power, 21st century talent. To me, Lehman Brothers was never rotten at the core. That's where all the beauty was. She was absolutely rotten at the head. We had two tribes in the firm. There was a group of revolutionaries over here, and over the years, this group grew. There was that ivory tower on the 31st floor, and most of the people in the firm through 2001, 2002, 2003 were very, very loyal to what we called King Richard Fold. But as I said earlier, Sun Tzu in The Art of War said over 2,000 years ago, if an emperor lives in fear of his own men, it's the sign of supreme incompetence. And That Club 31 at Lehman Brothers was an executive suite that was designed to be kind of a private club. They had a deep, dark secret up there. They didn't want to be exposed for all they didn't understand. Now, this is a chart of my net worth. The amazing thing about this chart in your investing lives is you want to look at this little section over here from 2008 on. And the amazing thing about this chart is from 2008 on, in that spring of 2008, Lehman Brothers raised $10 billion in equity, preferred stock, and convertible preferred stock. $10 billion on financials that were completely and utterly cooked and false. When I sat down with people in writing the book, I would go around in New York City in the cold winter days of the winter of 2008 into 2009. It was unbelievable. Restaurants that, at the top of the market, restaurants that required, you'd had to have the cell phone number of the maitre d' just to get a table. There were people playing cards at these restaurants in the winter of 2008 into 2009. As I would sit down with people, I'll never forget one of the comments. I said to this man, I said, I'm Larry McDonald. I want to write this book, A Colossal Failure of Common Sense, and bring this story to the world. He said to me, I am cancer. And the guilt on this person's face and in his words, the descriptions of the accounting shenanigans that we used to raise that money were just unbelievable. How many people in the room have heard of Repo 105? Anybody? It's a complicated accounting technique, but let me give you a really simple analogy. Imagine there's someone you really don't like, and you have a $2,000 bet in 14 days for a weight loss contest. And that person is overweight, and what they do is 2 days before the weight loss contest, they get a liposuction treatment and take all the weight off. And 2 weeks later, they put it all back, and it's back to Mr. Blimpies. And you lose the contest. Repo 105 was an accounting move which would allow Lehman Brothers to move assets off into a trust in the Cayman Islands or in Europe. Our leverage at the bank went down, so analysts and investors during these conference calls would see a much healthier balance sheet, a balance sheet and a financial institution that was much lower in leverage. That's what they would see. But a couple of weeks later, after we filed our financials, the true leverage would be exposed to the people inside the firm, but not to people outside the firm. And behind the scenes in New York today, I'll bring some news to you. The SEC and the Justice Department are interviewing our people at Lehman Brothers, these senior accounting people. And what they're doing is they are trying to put pressure on these people right under the CFO level. Some of the people that I've spoken with in the last couple of weeks have been brought in for the third, fourth, fifth time. So behind the scenes, I think we'll see action from the SEC. I don't know if they're going to get the big fish, as they did in Enron, but they are working very hard, and I think Goldman Sachs was the appetizer. Lehman could be the main course. Now, this painting was out in front of Lehman Brothers for 2 weeks after we filed bankruptcy. The artist is Jeffrey Raymond. And for the ladies in the room, I hope you're not wearing glasses, or I hope you're in the back, because these phrases and these quotes are from Lehman employees. And one of my friends was walking by the building, And he asked Mr. Raymond, he said, how much for the painting? And Mr. Raymond said, I'm going to put it on eBay for $10,000. But if you had it on you, I'd give you $8,000. And my friend Larry was so bummed out and not really working. He had gone up to Mohegan Sun the night before, which is a casino up in Connecticut. He had a pretty decent time. He whips out the $8,000 and he walked away with the painting. The problem is his wife doesn't know what to do with it. They don't know what room in the house to put it in. Now, this is an actual, I didn't make this cartoon up. This cartoon was actually in the Financial Times. At the top of the market in 2007, our balance sheet was over $700 billion. In 1998, when the bank almost failed, the balance sheet was $38 billion. So picture that in your mind. From 1998, during the long-term capital debacle, to 2007, the balance sheet went from $38 billion to $700 million, with the same clowns overseeing the risk. We had on our board an actress who was in motion pictures with Spencer Tracy. Ladies and gentlemen, Spencer Tracy died in 1967. We had an admiral in the Navy on our board. Can you picture Dick Fold behind the wheel of an aircraft carrier? This board was handpicked and to be massageable. It was designed for manipulation. Behind the scenes, a lot of boards like this existed on Wall Street in 2006, 2007. The Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission is trying to do some things about this. A couple things they're working on are right in here. When you have a chairman of the board that's also the CEO, it's very, very, very much like the fox watching the chicken coop. Because if you're chairman of the board and the CEO, as all the banks in the United States in 2006, 7, and 8, most of the CEOs had those dual roles. And we're seeing behind the scenes, Goldman has set up a special committee to examine the breakup of chairman of the board and CEO, AIG, a lot of firms, this is changing. Corporate governance is such an important factor in risk management. One of the things that I was appalled as I wrote the book and as I put the story together, as I sat down with person after person, it was like peeling back an onion and you get in the middle of it and you're staring at skull and crossbones. I was appalled that our global head of risk management, Madeline Antonczyk, and our key risk people never had direct conversations with the board members. So the board members were just separated. So it's like two different firms. You know, the CFO level, the executive suite and board, and the people in the middle of the ship. In one of our meetings, when we were examining the TXU deal, does everybody remember the LBO boom in 2007? It was an amazing time. Every day, every Monday, they used to call it Merger Monday because there'd be a different LBO deal. And stocks were going through the roof. The Dow was approaching 14,000. And we had this one woman who was speaking to some of our committees, the risk committee as well as the executive committee, not to the board, and she was our global head of risk. And she objected to a deal we were doing in the TXU transaction, over a $30 billion transaction, the largest LBO in the history of the world. Now picture in your mind, at this point in time, Lehman Brothers is like a middleweight boxer in the ring with a Larry Holmes, a big, huge Mike Tyson heavyweight, okay? We had a smaller balance sheet, and we were trying to lever it up, using leverage to compete on these deals. Madeline didn't want it. I had great conversations with her. And I asked her, when you objected to this TXU deal, what happened in some of these meetings? Our CEO, Richard Fold, slammed his fist down on the table and said, Madeline, shut up. Within a couple of weeks and months, they found a new job for Madeline. She was named Chief Government Liaison. And they moved her from risk management to, I guess, talking to political people. There were two tribes in this firm. At Lehman Brothers, you kept your head down, you did your job, or you lost both. And another amazing story. Could we hold these to the end? Oh yeah, leverage buyout. An LBO transaction is a leverage buyout. So it's using borrowed money to buy, borrowing money to buy another firm. So TXU is an energy company in the South, and Lehman Brothers was loaning money to big private equity firms and taking on a lot of the risk, because what Lehman was doing is they were loaning the money, and then they were going to sell some of the bonds over here over the course of 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. So can you imagine the risk involved in an LBO transaction if you can't move the paper, if you can't move that structure that you're trying to help create? And after the turn of the century, how many young people have ever heard of the Glass-Steagall Act? If I asked the same question like 5 years ago, very few people would know that act. And the Glass-Steagall Act was designed to really keep the investment banks doing their thing and taking some risks, and the commercial banks only holding bank deposits. And after the turn of the century, you had the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, and Republicans and Democrats were behind the dismantling of the Glass-Steagall Act. So that's what put Lehman Brothers in a situation where it's competing with these very large banks. And there was a meeting at Lehman Brothers in 2001, 2002, where executives were very concerned that we didn't have the balance sheet to compete against these giants, but they also saw some things coming down the road. The equity market and the stock market was being commoditized by spreads. So back in 2001, if you traded Intel or Microsoft, there was a much bigger spread than there is today. Today, these stocks have penny spreads. And the executives in Lehman were afraid that the spreads on the equity business would collapse because of technology and more transparency, and that equity business, which is a big engine of the firm, would be much less profitable. They were also concerned about this happening in the bond market, because when I joined Lehman Brothers, I used to trade distressed bonds. So if Fidelity called me and said, "Where are Delta Airlines bonds?" I'd make them say 21 to 10 million up. And when I traded those bonds, we didn't show the price to any investors in 2004. But by 2005, 6, and 7, we had to print to the whole world where we did the trades. So our executives saw this coming back in 2001, 2002, and what they were doing is they were trying to figure out a way to keep profitable at the same level, because they were worried about these new changes. And one of the things that they did was they turned the bank into essentially a casino, a hedge fund. A hedge fund takes directional bets. An investment bank the size of Lehman Brothers years ago was bringing companies public, was in the moving business. So 100 years ago, or maybe 80 years ago, when Campbell Soup wanted to go public, which Lehman helped them come public, and say they needed $10 million to build some plants to create new cans of soup. You know, canned soup was a new technology in the early 1800s. And this was a growing, thriving business. Lehman Brothers would lend the money to Campbell Soup and then sell the bonds and make a fee. After the turn of the century, Lehman Brothers got deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the storage business, taking directional, massive bets. At the top of the market in 2007, we had 38% of our net tangible equity in 3 commercial real estate transactions. Archstone Smith, Tour de France, which was the largest commercial real estate transaction in the history of Europe, as well as SunCal, which was supposed to be 4 golf courses out in California. They called it the Inland Empire. It's now one of the biggest dust bowls on the planet. Directional bets at the top of the market, we lost our way. I was so fortunate this spring. How many people have ever heard of Charlie Munger? Charlie Munger is really, some people say he's the brains behind Buffett. He's Warren Buffett's right-hand man. And I got a call from his office. Mr. Munger wanted me to go out to Omaha and give me the chance to meet him. He'd read the book. He loved the book. He thinks that the book is a great message carrier about corporate governance to young people and investors around the world. And I had always wanted to go to Omaha and see the annual meeting. I mean, this is like a mecca event, of investors. I get off the plane and the whole town, it's a small town, there's 30,000 people coming to Omaha for this event. On the Saturday, I saw something that I'll never forget. They hold this event in the equivalent of a basketball stadium. And there were 18 different stations where investors can ask Buffett and Munger anything they wanted. People were asking questions about their stake in Goldman Sachs. People were asking questions about different investments. One little gal she was Indian, she got up there and asked Mr. Buffett, she said, "Mr. Buffett, why aren't you investing in India?" Turns out about Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett doesn't have, the Berkshire has no investments really meaningful in India. So the lesson here is it was the ultimate in corporate transparency, the ultimate example of 2 people that for 6 hours just answered every single possible question from all of their investors around the world. This type of thing would never in a billion years happen at Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Merrill Lynch. Just wouldn't happen. These 2 men have integrity. I've been talking recently, we're working on a new book, and when I want to speak about integrity and character and ethics, Bill Gross is a famous investor who's at PIMCO, and he tells the story about years ago. He was in the 70s, there were 2 men from Omaha that wanted to borrow $10 million from him. And they came out to the West Coast, they met Mr. Gross, and the amazing thing was they had this See's Candy Shop, which is one of the famous Buffett positions, and they had this furniture company. And sure enough, Bill Gross turned them down. 2 weeks later, there were these two men from Arkansas that invited him over to see their new kind of store. And he flies in, they pick him up in the airport in a pickup truck with a dog barking in the back. This is Sam Walton. And Bill Gross, they wanted to borrow $15 million. And Bill Gross, said, geez, I'm looking at this store. The dog, as they're walking through town, anytime there was another dog that was in the area, they would stop the truck and say, go get him, Duke. But Gross's line and Mr. Munger's line to me in that private meeting is all about integrity, character. And Bill Gross said something to me that, as well as Charlie Munger has said to me, is that when they look at investments, it's all about the character of the person. And forget all of the crazy nuances of the business. 2 weeks later, another company wanted to borrow some money from Bill Gross. They were leasing, it was a leasing company, and they actually had some cars that were part of these railroads. And Bill Gross saw the equipment. He went up to their offices. They had carpets this thick, beautiful, gorgeous secretaries. They called them secretaries back then. And Bill Gross lent these guys $20 million. Never saw it again. And in my meeting with Charlie Munger, he talked about Richard Fuld, our CEO. He talked about the Lehman management. He talked about how when Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger were approached by Lehman Brothers, Hank Paulson wanted to try to broker a deal early on, and they needed to borrow several $1 billion from, Lehman needed to borrow several $1 billion from Berkshire. And it was the character of our management and the lack of transparency that kept them away. And I just think Sheila and Rich, to me, represent a character in people that, as investors, you always want to look at the character, the people, not the company. Management is so important, and that's what we were lacking at Lehman Brothers. Now, this number 3 stat is one of the most horrific of them all. In 2007, there were only 4,000 people that were looking at the investment banks. And I was at a speaking engagement in Canada with Mr. Macropolis, who wrote the book about the Madoff scandal. And he has a great line, which I have to give him credit for. He said in 2007, 2008, you could take all 4,000 analysts at the SEC, you could bring them to Yankee Stadium, put them in the front row, and they couldn't find first base. And the thing that I'm talking about behind the scenes, what I'm hearing in Washington, is the playing field is in 2006, 2007, 2008. I can't begin to tell you how unfair the playing field is. It's like going to a baseball stadium, and you've got the SEC versus Wall Street. But it's like going to a baseball stadium. It's the New York Yankees versus the Bad News Bears. The average person on our Club 31's making 10, 15, 20 million bucks a year. These civil servants are making $65,000, $70,000 a year. It's not fair. And what the regulators are trying to do is try to figure out a way to get some of the talent from Wall Street to work inside the SEC, the FDIC. Because at the end of the day, regulation and risk management, at least acknowledging the risks in the system, are so important, and without the right talent in some of the right spots, we're missing the ball. Now, this is this first statistic, this first point is one of the reasons why I'm on the lecture tour. And to me, the banks today, everybody's heard too big to fail, too big to fail, too big to fail. The banks, they're not too big to fail. They're too big to succeed. They're too big to be managed. 15 years ago, the combined assets of the biggest banks were only 17% of GDP. So our GDP in the United States is around 15 trillion. By 2009, they were up to 63% of GDP. In Bank America alone, there are 52 companies that used to exist separately 15 years ago. Inside of Bank America, you have Merrill Lynch, you've got Countrywide, you've got BlackRock, and you've got so many different companies that are in. The Fleet Bank is inside of Bank America. And I remember years ago, because I grew up in New England, Fleet Bank bought about 20 banks. So there's just so many companies that are inside this balance sheet that the analysts can't figure out the risk. And I think what's happening behind the scenes in this Dodd-Frank bill is they're trying to break up the banks, but they don't want to do it too quickly because they're worried about, they're worried about the fragility of the banking system. And they're worried about doing things too quickly that'll hurt the banking system. It'll hurt lending, put lending in an even worse spot than we're at right now. Now you see here, this is an interactive chart, but these are the deposits of the biggest banks. So these deposits, as you can see from 2000, once that Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act took down Glass-Steagall, as you can see, the deposits kept growing and growing and growing. And one of the things that Charlie Munger said to me in our meeting on the Sunday, I had a one-on-one 45-minute meeting with Mr. Munger, and what he's so appalled at is that these big banks that are holding innocent people's deposits are also holding credit derivatives, credit default swaps in massive, massive size. When I was at Lehman in the winter of 2006, we had a young man, we had a bunch of young people that were on winter break. And one of the guys was from MIT, number of them were from Harvard. They were on the winter break, and I came back from dinner to get my bag, and I saw one of the kids there. His name is Matthew, and he had a computer screen up like this. And I said, "Matthew, what are you doing?" And he had on the computer screen, there were about 50 high-yield bonds and 50 credit default swaps. And I said, "Matthew, that's about $100 million. I think it was about $120 million of risk." He said, "Yeah, that's my basis pad." I said, "Matthew, you're on winter break from MIT." He goes, "Yeah, well, I'm going to run it now, and when I get back from winter break, I'm going to take it over in the summer." On the trading floor at Lehman Brothers, the mantra was, and all over Wall Street in 2006, 2007, 2008, take more risk, take more risk, take more risk. Young kids with $100 million pads. When I joined the firm, I had $50 million of risk on the pad, $50 million. When I left the firm, I had $500 million worth of bonds that I traded, $500 million. When I sat down with another gentleman, a trader that ran our mortgage-backed securities, he was one of the guys that ran our mortgage-backed securities desk. And when I was at the firm, most of the employees did not really know that we owned two huge mortgage brokers out in the countryside, B&C and Aurora Mortgage. And he told me that in 2004, when I joined the firm, we were originating $500 million a month of subprime and Alt-A mortgages. So picture that number, $500 million a month of subprime and Alt-A. When I left the firm, right before I left the firm, we were originating $3.5 to $4 billion a month of subprime mortgages. So this was part of the originate to distribute model. Most of the employees didn't know we had 10,000 of these mortgage brokers out in the countryside. Ladies and gentlemen, these are 10,000 of the most despicable human beings on the planet. They would think nothing of taking a senior citizen at the coffee table in the kitchen with the coffee brewing, head first headlock into a 20-year negative amortization loan. Absolutely, the paperwork was absolutely bamboozling people. The mortgage products were so sophisticated. Every buyer is responsible in a capitalist society for doing their homework, but this type of homework was advanced calculus. And this person, this one of our head managing directors in mortgage-backed securities, told me an amazing story. He said, in 2006, 2007, you could take a $2 billion securitization of these mortgages. So what Lehman would do is they would collect these mortgages from these people and then put them into a CDO or a big security, and would sell these, would break it up and would sell it all around the world in bonds. And he said that in 2007, 2006, you could take a $2 billion securitization and sell it in about 5 seconds. But he said toward the end of 2008, if you tried to move the same pile of risk, you'd call up the same customer, say, "Hey, I've got another $2 billion piece of this mortgage-backed securities to go." And the guy at the other end of the phone would say, "To who? Who are you going to sell this to?" And he said, "Well, my machine says they're worth 91 cents on the dollar." The guy says, "Well, sell it to your machine then." The lesson is that there was a fire in the theater. People were jumping over the seats. They were swinging on the chandeliers. They were trying to get out through the bathroom window. Liquidity, when you invest, is a cardinal rule. Whenever you get into an investment, you have to have an exit strategy. It might be the most brilliant investment in the world, mathematically, but if you can't get out of it, you're going to get burnt. And what Lehman Brothers was doing, and what a lot of banks were doing, is there's one door, and if we all try to get through that door at the same time, a lot of people are going to get hurt. And the amazing thing about some of these mortgage-backed securities, these advanced transactions, they traded forever and a day at around par. For years and years and years, these securities traded at par, which is 100. And then in late 07, early 08, traded down at 91, maybe one print at 70, and then 20, and stayed there for a year and a half because too many people on the street were trying to sell these things at the same time. And you couldn't figure out the risk because there was horrific, horrific transparency in these securities. One of the things that Mr. Munger said to me in terms of worries on the forefront, years ago, we had 5 big accounting firms, but Enron brought down Arthur Andersen. Now, Lehman Brothers accounting firm is a firm by the name of Ernst & Young. And lo and behold, 2 of our CFOs used to work at Ernst & Young. The problem today is you have Ernst & Young, there's only 4 big accounting firms left. 4. The problem today is these accounting firms are also too big to fail. So no matter how many bad things firms like Ernst & Young did, Ernst & Young was looking over our books when we did these Repo 105 transactions. We had to get a legal opinion from a lawyer, a law firm in London to pull this Repo 105 off. We had to get a legal opinion from Linklaters in London. And we took that legal opinion, gave it to Ernst & Young, and they said, okay. So going forward, what you're seeing behind the scenes in terms of this Dodd-Frank bill is it's like a blueprint. And for anybody that wants my newsletter on this Dodd-Frank bill, it's lgmcdonald@yahoo.com, lgmcdonald@yahoo.com. But it's a blueprint, and behind the scenes, we're seeing meeting after meeting that will actually, slowly but surely, we'll actually see what this bill's all about. I could tell you this, after the crash of 1929, we had 11 years of financial reform. We had the Securities Act of 1933, Securities Act of 1934, and the Investment Company Act of 1940. And I was at the Peninsula Hotel 2 weeks ago. 2 months back. And it was unbelievable to see capitalist democracy in action. There were 2 senators, Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn, that were there. In the room, we only had 25 people in the room. And there were a number of hedge funds in the room. And this was a period where the hedge funds were trying to educate the senators on how the financial system really works behind the scenes. They were trying to educate the senators on things like the Resolution Authority. The Resolution Authority is how we're going to unwind the next Lehman Brothers. One of the problems with the financial crisis, the reason why so many people in this room were in so much financial pain after Lehman fell, was, if you picture in your mind, Hank Paulson in a Corvette, Dick Fold, our CEO, in a Porsche, and they're heading at each other 150 miles an hour. And they're waiting for the other guy to blink. In a normal bankruptcy, and I've been in parts of many of them as a distressed debt trader, in a normal bankruptcy, Northwest Airlines, United Airlines, there's hundreds of pages of filings that the judge and the bankruptcy court will see to prepare for the bankruptcy. Lehman Brothers did no preparation for the bankruptcy on purpose. They were holding a gun at Hank Paulson, our Secretary of the Treasury's head. This is $700 billion of risk. In order to unwind that risk, there should have been 1,000 pages of instructions of a plan to unwind the risk. When they let Lehman fail, make no mistake about it, Hank Paulson and his team at Treasury, they put Lehman Brothers' head underwater. and they watched for the bubbles. This was an execution. A lot of firms were screwed up. Bank of America, down at that Fed building. I've got friends that were at that Fed building that famous weekend. Bank of America's in one room on life support. AIG's in another room on life support. Washington Mutual's in another room on life support. Wachovia in another room. If one of our guys at Lehman that were negotiating this weekend transaction, we were trying to get a bailout, we were trying to get a spin-off of some of our bad assets. One of my friends had to go to the bathroom. He said a 250-pound guard with a machine gun walked him to the bathroom because they didn't want anybody poking around and looking at the other rooms, because the information you could gather just by sitting in on any one of these rooms was incredible. So many banks were on life support. If you picture in your mind a 250-pound heart attack victim flatline on the operating table, and we've all seen the movies where the doctor pulls out the defibrillators and goes ba-boom, they'd come to the conclusion that we needed to get the Troubled Asset Relief Program passed, the TARP passed. And the people at Treasury had come to the conclusion that the only way to get that passed would be to scare the living daylights out of Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, and Barney Frank. They let Lehman go to try to help the other banks to live. And in closing, I just want to bring you all to that last weekend that Sheila did such a marvelous job describing from the outside. Our bankers were in meetings for 2 weeks with Bank of America. Bank of America looked under the Lehman Brothers hood for 2 weeks, and as I got phone calls on Wednesday and Thursday, the descriptions from my friends that were in some of these meetings were unbelievable. You know, in life, when you have a friend or an acquaintance that's betrayed you, these bankers from Bank of America were just becoming disengaged with Lehman Brothers. Through the week, as the week went on, they were leaving the room more often to take phone calls. They were less engaged. There was a tap on the shoulder. Hank Paulson in Treasury told Bank of America to buy Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch was a bigger piece of risk, more screwed up than Lehman Brothers. Merrill Lynch had 3 times the toxic mortgage products that Lehman had. That's why when you see Bank of America's earnings today, they came out 2 weeks ago, the dirty, horrific secret is they're still paying the price for that acquisition of Merrill Lynch and Countrywide. They're literally bleeding out the truth one little drop at a time. Everybody's being bamboozled, trust me. The smartest analysts in the world can't figure out Bank of America. That's why 3 months ago, there must have been 10 buys and 2 sells, and the stock's gone from 17 to 12. They can't figure out the risk. And as we headed into the weekend, there were people at Lehman Brothers that were warning people at Treasury and the Fed about our balance sheet. We had $6 trillion of credit default swaps with 17 different counterparties. And our guys were saying a lot of these trades were not really settled. If we do a stock trade today, you and I, right now, we do a stock trade, and I sell the stock through Fidelity and you buy it, our cash and stock exchanges in 3 days. With credit default swaps, the settlements were months and months and months behind. Our people were down at that Fed building saying to our government executives, you don't understand what you're doing. You will unleash the forces of evil on the global financial markets. And they kept on saying, we've got it under control. It's your problem. Deal with it. And then toward the end of the day on Sunday, and this is the most, to me, this is just one of the most unbelievable stories of the whole crisis. We've all been in restaurants and bars when it's getting to closing time. And you remember when the bouncers come around and they kind of put their arm around you to kick you out. Our guys essentially, our chief legal counsel, our entire team was essentially just pushed out of the building. They were coming up with ideas, solutions. They thought that the bankruptcy and letting Lehman fail would be such a horrific thing for the global economy that we should at least try to do what they did with Fannie and Freddie, at least try to do what they did with AIG, and at least unwind the risk slowly. That's what they're talking about in Washington right now with this resolution authority behind the scenes, is in the future, they want to unwind a Lehman Brothers in a more controlled way. Because the way this bank was unwound, the reason why every day in September, October, November of 2008, you remember around 2 o'clock the market would be down another 300 points every time? Because Lehman Brothers was unwinding all of that $700 billion worth of risk. We had dozens and dozens of hedge funds that we were their prime broker. So we held their assets. We're just selling this stuff in the street every day. They didn't understand what they were doing. We did unleash the forces of evil in the global financial markets, and quantitative easing 1 and 2, 3, 4, and 5 are partly responsible or because of the failure of Lehman Brothers. But that night, I tried to go to bed, and it was around 11. I tried to go to bed. I woke up around 2 in the morning, 1:30, and I tiptoed over the computer. As I have so many times in my career as a distressed debt trader, there have been many times in the case of Calpine or Adelphia where I've been short. In other words, betting against certain companies and hoping for bankruptcy. This time I was looking at a life-changing event for me. And I saw the news hit my computer screen. Lehman Brothers files the largest bankruptcy in the history of the world. And I just felt like I was down on the mat. I felt like Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson had just hit me with a roundhouse hook down. And throughout your lives, young people, you will be challenged. There will be moments in your lives when you have to just dig deep down for that inner reserve that everybody has. And I just felt to myself, I got to make a positive out of a horrific negative here. I knew I had Patrick over in London, and I knew I was part of this wonderful kind of group of people, this group of revolutionaries that try to stop some of these horrific things. So I called Patrick, and I was almost afraid that he would say yes. I told him about my idea, and I just didn't, I almost was just, I wanted to do it, but I just didn't have I didn't know if I had the guts to tell this story. It's taking a lot of risks. It's a private club. Bringing the truth to you all. And then Patrick said, can you come on over tomorrow night for dinner? And I said, Patrick, you're on the other side of the Atlantic. And he said, we got to get cracking. The next morning, I found myself on the tarmac at Newark Airport. And as the plane raced down the runway, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, that Boeing 767 wheels up, took off, and I just got a chill down my spine. I knew I was going to make a big difference here. I was going to go down this different path, this different road. But as the plane banked toward the northeast, I looked out my window, and through the clouds and the raindrops on the window, I could see Times Square. And as Sheila described, the beauty of that building glistening off on the horizon. To me, the greatest investment bank this world had ever known. And I said to myself, it's time to go pick a fight. Thank you very much. Thanks, thank you, Richard.
Larry is inviting questions, so if there are things that you want to know, things he mentioned, things that he didn't mention, the man, I've been impressed over the last day. I've spent a lot of time with him. I haven't found anything yet he doesn't know, so I would invite you to ask them.
Notes here. You talked about the transparency and the Dodd-Frank bill. Is that a big problem? The government isn't transparent either. You know, the SEC isn't transparent. They just got busted for the pornography scandal. but you got guys that don't understand the economy trying to draft economic legislation. And the big thing missing from Dodd-Frank that I can tell is that they haven't created a marketplace for credit default swaps. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, great points. Yeah, I will. It's around transparency. The government is not very transparent on how they produce legislation. Some of these bills, like Dodd-Frank is 2,600 pages, and I think Glass-Steagall was like 10, and I think Sarbanes-Oxley was like 800. You're absolutely right. The transparency in Washington leaves a lot to be desired. There's crazy things going on around the SEC. He mentioned in terms of there were SEC analysts on TV on the computer looking at pornography. And the thrust of the question was around credit default swaps and establishing an exchange. And if you picture the Dodd-Frank bill, there's certain parts of the bill that are on a faster track, like an HOV lane to get done. And then there's certain parts of the bill that are probably going to get done, like the rating agencies that they've pushed back, Fannie and Freddie, and there's other pieces of legislation that are coming down the pike. And there's certain parts of the bill that are pushed out in terms of forcing the banks to deleverage. From what I hear, and just yesterday, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission had another meeting, a third meeting in D.C. So they are holding these public meetings that people are allowed to go to. Unfortunately, a lot of American people are too busy, and they're not going to some of these meetings. I've got friends that are in these meetings, and these meetings should be more, have more attendance than they do. But I still think you're right, that the transparency overall and the bamboozle factor in out of D.C. is bad. But I would say around the CDS contracts being put onto exchanges, that seems to me to be something that you'll see in a year and a half from now, which is faster than some of the other stuff. But kind of to your point, around Dodd-Frank, one of the sad things about it is, it's very political. Elizabeth Warren is a very good friend of Larry Summers, and she was supposed to be in charge of this Consumer Protection Act. Larry Summers was appointed by President Obama. And not to be political, I won't be political, but I would say that the fastest part of this bill is around the Consumer Protection Agency. The Consumer Protection Agency is one of the parts of Dodd-Frank. And one of the main hallmarks of the Consumer Protection Agency are some of these bank fees that you talked about, and also around MasterCard and Visa. And I don't want to say that MasterCard and Visa aren't important, but they didn't bring down the global financial system. And so it seems to me like the faster tracks are the low-hanging fruit, and they're going after the low-hanging fruit, the less complicated things first. An amazing stat. How many people know what insider trading is? Take a guess. In the history of our country, take a guess at how many insider trading cases have ever been tried on credit default swaps. Close. There's only been one. It's the classic case. These guys let's just say we know that, say we know Walmart's going to get taken over tomorrow. Okay, you can make more money by buying the credit default swap. Okay, or shorting it. Okay, actually in that case you'd short it. So, or say you knew a company was going to come out with really bad news, we could make a fortune by buying the credit default swap. And it's the same thing as buying the stock. I mean, it's more complicated, but this is what they're trying to address in these meetings with government, and this is why I've been working with these people. I mean, I'm on some of these conference calls with these government officials, and it's just, some days it's absolutely horrific, trying to educate these people. The complications of 21st century financial products, the advancement in the technologies around finance the last 10 years have just gone so much faster than people at Moody's, people at S&P, people in in government. Next question.
Any opinion on flash trading?
Yeah, well, I'm doing a lot of these speaking engagements at these conferences, and I've really learned a lot about flash trading. I didn't know much about it, a year and a half ago or a year ago. One thing I've heard is that today a big hedge fund.
Maybe we have to define.
Oh yeah, flash trading is high-frequency trading allows an investor to machine gun massive, fast impulse stock trades. And the technology is very advanced. Hedge funds now are using broker-dealers to actually execute these trades in rapid fire. And it's a way you can one of the things you can do with it is you can sell something, and here's one of the manipulative things about it. When we would try to, there's a great story in the book about Delta Airlines. Sometimes when you're trading, it's a poker game. With bonds, sometimes traders would sell things just to buy them. In other words, you try to push it down. And traders would do these type of things. But if you do it with a flash crash or a high frequency situation, it's incredibly more powerful, because say you want to sell something in rapid fire because you're worried about what's happening in Greece. The day of the flash crash, there was all really bad things going on in Greece. There were 3 or 4 people that died at a bank because of a terrorist, well, not really, more like a riot. The Greek bonds were trading at 15% interest. And there were people that were rapid firing these stock transactions and selling them and knocking. When you have a stock like IBM, it's got or Procter & Gamble, it's got a bunch of layers of buyers. But if you piled down through those buyers, at some point, you go through them all, and then there's like this elevator shaft, and that's what was happening. Is they were rapid fire, and there wasn't enough measurements or protections to prevent something from driving that stock all the way down from 46 to 2 in some cases. And this is another element of financial reform. It's another advanced technology that is kind of lurking out there that's creating problems.
I do have a question. And in listening to, kind of a question and a comment. Listening to you, listening to some of the other people who have written books like yours, there are 2 or 3 other
Sure.
top books, listening to hearings on C-SPAN, reading what I can in the paper, and starting in the fall of 2008, I have an impression that I can read and I can listen, but I'm just a little person. And most of us are just little people. And there's this huge, gigantic entity stomping around the globe, very sophisticated, with lots of technology that most of us probably really don't understand. And it's fascinating to listen to you talk about this. But it's kind of a reactive thing for little people like me. It's very frightening, and it's very scary, and I feel like I absolutely, no matter what, there are these huge governmental entities and business entities, nothing I really can do, because this is so out of my league. And that's most of us in this country. So although there are regulations that are being refined now, I still have the feeling that there's some kind of revolving door between business and government, and we still don't have, us little tiny people don't really have any control over it. And it's a really scary feeling.
Yeah.
Kind of, we're adrift and with nothing really firm to latch, and nobody who's really going to help us tiny little people. So I just want your comment on that. You know, you must hear this at some of your
I do,
speaking
yeah.
talks.
I just heard it today. Well, a couple things about that. It's a double-edged sword, really, because there's no question that the problems and the technologies and everything that faces us is much more advanced. And you're absolutely right. There's this symbiotic relationship between government and Wall Street that originally some of the reforms are supposed to be much more severe. And then a lot of the people in Washington held these breakfasts and events that I've seen, and where a lot of fundraising goes on and a lot of influence peddling goes on. I've seen it in D.C. and in New York firsthand. The other side of the coin is that, take Twitter, for example. The Chinese government is literally terrified of Twitter, and so is the Russian government during some of the information on some of these websites. The democratization of financial information is so unbelievable, and that's a huge, huge, huge positive. So we have ability to get information at a level that we've never, ever had before. Websites like Zero Hedge, websites like Minionville. I sat down with Todd Harrison, the founder of Minionville. You should see this amazing little place. It's in New York on 3rd Avenue. You go up there on the 6th or 7th floor. There's like 50 kids in there, and they're just dedicated to giving you the most advanced possible analysis, color, information that 10 years ago just didn't exist. You'd have to go to your broker and beg for him to give it to you. So the fact that you're on C-SPAN is just so commendable. And, you know, it's everybody has a voice. I think that this election is going to have a big influence on the process, because I think a lot of people feel the way you do. Everybody feels like they're little people. Nobody feels like they can make a difference. But if these politicians get a message that things have to change, we can all make a difference, and that's why I'm out here. I'm doing my best to speak for you.
Just make a quick comment, if I might, following up on what the young lady just said. Let me get on. Thank you. I'm 69 years old and own my own business, and my son really does a lot more work than I do on it. And we had a real healthy business until 2008. Our business is connected directly with the construction business. I had to fire my son. I had the bankruptcy package on its way to Charlotte, and served my country, always believed in it. But I'll tell you right now, I think Washington, D.C. is a bunch of crooks, and I think the election coming up will replace crooks with crooks, and then the next one will be crooks with crooks. I see these guys making $25, $30, or $40 million, and it just doesn't make sense to me. And I do believe that, or I question whether my vote is going to make a whole hell of a lot of difference. Thank you.
Well, my brother Darren, one of the reasons why I'm out here is my brother Darren has a company like yours, and he, right before Lehman failed, he employed 80 people, of which I knew 20, I knew probably 50 of them. And they're really nice people. They're hardworking people. Darren had a asphalt company, so he produced asphalt for a lot of corporations and a lot of big parking lots and things like that. And after Lehman fell, he had to fire 80% of his workforce because the bank lines were chopped on all of his credit lines without any notice, really. And you know, I think we've all, I mean, you've lived a lot longer than I have. I think democratic capitalism goes through these periods where you feel helpless. But it still is. I mean, I've been traveling all over the world. I mean, I've been in Germany, and I've been in Beijing, all over Paris. I still think, as Buffett said, and Buffett said this in Omaha, we still have the best place to invest in the world. We still have the best system. It's really frustrating right now, especially for someone like yourself and with your son and all. My heart just breaks for you. But we got to get through it. We got to fight. And I'm going to be out there for you. And I wouldn't give up. And I'd talk to all your friends and everybody about that election. And I sit down regularly with members of the press. Charlie Gasparino, Maria Bartiromo have me on their shows all the time. And Charlie's new book is all about exposing this whole relationship between Washington and... So there are people, I mean, trying to do something about it. If that hope... Thank you.
Do you think that there's any time frame on? Do you think there's any time frame on bringing any of these people to some kind of justice, or doing some kind of investigation to find out what kind of fraud has been perpetrated on the world? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, will we see any of that? I think it would make people like this man here feel a lot better.
Well,
Maybe
there's a
all of us.
movie in the theaters called Inside Job with Charles Ferguson. And Mr. Ferguson called me up in the summer of 2009 and wanted to interview me. And he said he's going to interview all of these, Alistair Darling, Barney Frank, and things like that. And he interviewed me. And when we were in the interview, it was really, I knew about 10 seconds into it, I'm dealing with a cold, really calculated, almost killer type expose. And I was worried for myself. Even though I know I'm in the right, I know I'm doing a good thing, I'm taking a pay cut by writing this book. If I wanted to get a pay raise, I'd just go back to trading. But yet, I didn't know what he was up to. He did one of these documentaries about the Gulf War, and he's not to the left of Michael Moore, but he's pretty close. And I finally saw this thing. I'm in this movie, and I saw it a couple weeks ago, and I tell you what, this job he did was pretty damn good at defending you guys. I mean, this guy goes after, he lays it all out there. It's called Inside Job. And in terms of holding people accountable, he has, in the public opinion, on the movie screen, I think the movie, I guarantee with Hollywood, this movie will get an Academy Award. And it'll probably pick up steam. But in terms of actually bringing Dick Fold into jail, or Angelo Mazzillo, as we all know, just settled the case. Angelo was at Countrywide, so they got Angelo, but unfortunately, one of the dirty secrets is I think he got hit with like a $50 million fine, and Bank of America's paying for half of that. Which, behind the scenes though, the SEC is really getting close to Lehman executives. This bank, I'm telling you, they want a scalp. At the last crisis they got Enron, they got executives from Enron, WorldCom, and Adelphia. The Reguses at Adelphia. They got Bernie Ebbers at WorldCom. This one, they're like, they really didn't even get Mazzillo. They got a fine. So I think you'll see I think in the next 4 months, you'll see charges brought against Lehman executives in a major high-profile case, and which will probably help my book a little bit.
How would the economy and the market be different if Lehman Brothers were not allowed to fail?
Well, how would the economy be different if Lehman Brothers were not allowed to fail? Well, I'd have a couple more bucks, but the thing about Lehman, and this is what I say on TV all the time, is that when they let it go, it knocked GM and Chrysler right out of business. And it made all of the AIG liabilities to all the other firms much, much more expensive. So if you picture in your mind you're 10 years old and two kids in the neighborhood want to borrow money, and one kid needs $10, and the other kid, and this guy needs the $10 has no collateral to put up. Okay, he can't even lend you his bike. Okay. The other guy needs $150, but he has like $80 in collateral, maybe $70 in collateral. That's Lehman and AIG. Now, what they chose to do is they chose to let Lehman fail, and they chose to bail out AIG because Bernanke claims and Paulson claims that they had the collateral. But they lent AIG $180 billion. And AIG now, the Wall Street Journal is trying to know that. I mean, people I know that are trying to do the work, we can only find like $70 billion of collateral that AIG has. And we lent them 180. So they obviously were lying to us. And the whole point is that if you saved Lehman and unwound the risk over time, the market wouldn't have gone. We lost, after Lehman fell, we lost 4,000 points in the Dow. I mean, it went from 11 to more like 5. It went from 11,000 some odd, or maybe 10,008 to 6,400 and then back. If they didn't allow Lehman to fail, if they unwound the risk over time, the financial crisis would probably be just pushed out further. And we'd probably have, more of a longer-term bailout. I think they took some pain, they wiped some bad people out of the game, but there's still a lot of bad people in the game.
You made reference
Can we take
to...
these last four? We're beginning to run a little short on time. We want to leave Larry some time to sign books for those that want them. And,
Yeah, we're going to sign some books, so anybody has some books.
You made reference to Merrill Lynch and to Bank of America, which now wholly owns Merrill Lynch, and the impenetrable world of Bank of America. My question to you is, if you had assets invested with Merrill Lynch, is that something to worry about?
Well, the thing that saved Merrill was they have the thundering herd, right? We didn't have a thundering herd. And that's one of the reasons. I think the thing that saved Lehman was they had a bunch of talented people like Sheila. And the thing that saved Merrill was they had a bunch of talented people like Sheila. And someone like Sheila has hundreds and hundreds of customers. Those customers have lots and lots of net worth. They're trusting her. They're trusting her judgment. If they let a Merrill Lynch go, it would just be a real horrific show. I don't see a situation where they would ever let Bank of America fail. And so I think your money at Merrill Lynch is pretty safe.
I guess in retrospect, we can see the entire fall of Lehman Brothers, but I guess on a related note, last night I was watching PBS's Frontline documentary on the events leading up to the Deepwater Horizon disaster and the culture of corruption that had developed in BP's with safety standards, and how private reporters, you could follow the signs even though no one was really connecting the dots at the time. So getting back to Lehman Brothers, obviously no one in the company was speaking out and the FCC couldn't do anything. But I mean, from reporters, how deep could they actually dig into Lehman Brothers from 2000 to 2008? And could they have pieced together the picture of what was going to happen?
Well, that's a great comparison, the Deepwater Horizon thing, because it reminds me of like right before Lehman fell. Mm-hmm. In the top of the market in 2007, in the 48 months before the top of the market in 2007, the S&P 500 in those 48 months had not experienced more than an 8% correction, which is unbelievable because since then we've had dozens and dozens of 8% corrections. Mm-hmm. But it was almost like there was this tranquil sea, which marginalized the value of great risk takers. At Lehman, there were people that were speaking up, and they were literally just taken out to the woodshed and shot. People that I worked with, like at the best risk people we had, were taken out and absolutely waxed, like in The Sopranos. Make no mistake about it. But could a reporter dig deep down? They were digging. They were digging on subprime. They were getting warm. But the balance sheets are such black boxes back then. And years ago when banks failed, Drexel Burnham, Continental Illinois, the balance sheets were much smaller and much easier to figure out, right? So one of the dirty secrets of the financial crisis was the balance sheets were so complex and there was no transparency. Lehman Brothers wouldn't disclose exactly how much subprime we had. And reporters, I remember being on these conference calls, and the analysts were trying to figure out, and if you look at the conference calls, I've read all the Lehman conference calls, I've read them all like 8 times, from 2004 to 2008. It's one of the things I did when I was writing the book. And you could see in the questions that the analysts were getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And the reporters were getting warmer, but nobody was digging down. And the reason they weren't getting down deep enough because of the complexities of the balance sheets. There are great hedge fund managers. I'm good friends with David Einhorn of Greenlight Capital. David is an amazing talent. Hedge fund managers and short sellers are a valuable thing for our society because he did a speech in the spring of 2008, before we failed. And he was talking about some of these things we were doing on the balance sheet, but nobody believed him because there was this period of tranquility, just like Deepwater Horizon. Even though there were warning signs, there was such a period, we'd never had, I think, thousands and thousands and thousands of these drilling units had been operated, without a lot of problems. And so it created a situation where everybody let their guard down. And the same thing happened at Lehman Brothers.
I'm interested in your recommendations for change. And short of, say, taking some of these people out and having public hangings, I was wondering whether or not you might recommend changes in compensation packages at the top, the middle, at various levels that would change the culture so that people wouldn't have this overriding greed to keep pumping up and making more and more money.
Yeah. Well, the first thing you do in compensation, the first thing you do is, and we're talking, the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission is talking about this, there's people in Washington talking about this, is you give pay raises to people on the regulatory side. That's the first thing you do, is give pay raises to people at the FDIC, the SEC, because they're just not, they don't have the talent there because the talent's all going to Wall Street. And the reason why it's going to Wall Street is to get paid more. Second thing you do is some of the things that I talked about earlier in terms of risk management. Our risk management people were not allowed to talk to the board. They had to go through executives. The risk management teams of these big banks should have direct reporting lines to the boards, monthly meetings, to just air it all out. In other words, don't hide the kind of, some people want to ruffle feathers from time to time, and that has to be allowed. In terms of the compensation, I can tell you right now, although you may or may not believe it, the compensation all comes down to leverage, right? So if you force the banks to delever, as Basel III is doing, and as Dodd-Frank is going to do, Lehman Brothers is 40 times levered, right? 40 times. So imagine you and I go into a casino with $100 in our back pocket, but we're playing at the table with $4,000. That's 40 times leverage. So a very small loss in our money at the tables can wipe out our net capital. When you have that type of leverage, the bonus pools all over the street are so much inflated because Wall Street trading and sales and all these things, they can use this money to give lots of bonuses, to hire lots of traders, to hire lots of salespeople. Everybody makes a lot of money. With less leverage, there's no question that the bonuses are going to come down, although the press will show you Goldman bonuses and they'll say this and that. But I'm telling you, most of the people I know, and I know hundreds and hundreds of people, they're making half what they made in 06, 07.
Can you speak to the significance of the AAA ratings that were sent around the world by Standard & Poor and people like agencies such as that, and whether they're going to be asked to answer for any of this?
Well, that's one of the distinct pointing. The question is around the rating agencies and the Dodd-Frank bill. They wanted to get the bill passed before the election. They wanted a nice notch on the president's resume, which is fine. He's entitled to do that. So they did not tackle the rating agencies in this bill. I mean, as you can see in this bill, right, and I can email this stuff to you, but it's LG McDonald at Yahoo if you want to see this stuff. But look at the pages of this legislation. I mean, this is like consumer protection, right? And then you have Federal Reserve accountability, and then you have the Resolution Authority, which I talked about earlier. These are all different pieces of the bill, investor protection. So the point is that they didn't want to tackle this man. Everybody's heard of Al Franken. If you told me 20 years ago that a comedian from Saturday Night Live would, he was one of the funniest guys. I remember the movie Trading Places? I think he was in the gorilla suit. But he came up with this rating agency stuff, and he worked hard on it. His team worked out hard on it. And what they're trying to do is they've pushed this back, but they're going to bring it back in like 2012, 13. And what it's going to do is it's going to create kind of a board that oversees the rating agencies. And this board will kind of have influence over their ratings and kind of oversee them. One of the things that is being suggested behind the scenes is that people on this new board are almost like jury duty. So people from the hedge fund community, people from asset management, Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, you're having a situation where they're brought onto this committee, and from time to time, these people go up. It's like jury duty, and they help the people because we don't want the committee to be uninformed kind of civil servants that are overlooking Standard & Poor's and Moody's. But that's all out in the future, and they just didn't want to tackle it right now.
Thank you very much, Larry.
Thank you.
We're going to have a signing right over here. For those of you who are interested, he will be signing some books sitting over here. You can also sign up for his newsletter. If you like, you're welcome to sign up for the Jameson Financial Group newsletter. We do one weekly. One last comment on the complexity of these CDS's, credit default swaps. There was an article appeared in the paper about 6 months ago where Lehman hired 200 accountants. These credit default swaps were largely private transactions. 200 accountants to unravel 1 million contracts. Figured it was going to take them 2 years, but that's only $5,000 per accountant. Also, thank you all very much for attending. It was a pleasure having you here. We look forward to seeing you again with some other topics, hopefully of this or greater interest.